Just to say again, you probably all have realized, the way we're conceiving of what we're calling soul-making and the path of soul-making, dharma or practice, is really quite wide. Do you get the sense how it can actually involve the whole of our beings, more even than more dimensions and aspects of our being than we're even aware of at the moment? You know, so it can grow and it can move in different directions, and these different aspects and parts, or aspects of the path, kind of support each other. So the well-being, the samadhi, is, it's an important part. The working with difficult emotions, the being able to tend to to notice, to be aware of, to care for what's happening emotionally. This is a really important part of soul-making. Of the whole frame, and desire, and being able to open up desire in different ways, being able to let go of desire, emptiness, imaginal, etc., etc. So, in terms of Q&As, please consider all that fair game. So, all of that's part of the package, and any aspect of that you're working with or wondering about, or you have a question about, whether it's a difficulty or a loveliness or a curiosity or the conceptual framework. So it's really open. And as I said yesterday, we are recording for the benefit of everyone, hopefully, and other beings elsewhere. But if you don't feel comfortable with your question being recorded, just say so, and I'll press pause. Yeah, so that's completely fine. So anybody?
Okay.
Andrea. Sorry.
Yeah, this is more of a surprise, and it kind of goes to Catherine as well, because you both said it in different ways yesterday, but it was the concept turning into percept, and I think it was Catherine who said it that way. And when we did the chanting yesterday,
this morning?
No, it wasn't chanting. It was sound.
Yeah.
And the sound, there was a combination of all the sound that we were making in the room, and then the suggestion from Catherine with what I feel was kinesthetic language. And that was huge in unlocking the energy body, and then later in the exercise with the moving the way your soul wanted to move again. So I guess my wondering is different ways in to the energy body, particularly with, I would have said I'm purely kinesthetic, but obviously the language makes a huge difference to getting in. And at other times when I've just tried to work with the energy body and just bring the attention there, it's not happening.
Yeah.
But it was so easy and so effortless in those other modes. So the question is, can you give more suggestions, or is it just kind of play around and take minutes?
So if I understand the question, Andrea's reporting that in both, I don't know what to call it, when we sounded together yesterday, which I found really beautiful when we do that. I really like it. And there was a way that the sense of the energy body just really opened with the sounding and through the verbal suggestions that Catherine was making and the kind of language in there. And then also when we did the moving to the urgings and the promptings of soul, the connection, the language there, whatever was said, also stimulated a kind of opening and awareness and connection with the energy body that can sometimes not be so available when one's just sitting down, right, okay, energy body, let's open it up and working with it more technically. Is that?
Yeah, it was the invitation to move.
The invitation to move, specific to move. Okay, good. Yes. Energy body is part of all this business, and all this business, meaning the opening of soul making, including the opening of the sense of the energy body and that liquidity of that and the dimensionality of the very sense of the body, all of that opening can be ignited. So it's really like if we use the analogy of fire, it can be sparked by actually by anything. Okay, so there's a way that we could say that all this business of soul making is a kind of, I mentioned it's a kind of a grace. We're given it. We receive something. We receive a spark into the soul, and something ignites. Yeah. So that spark could be a line of poetry. It could be a certain way of languaging that connects certain elements of our being or aspects of our being that we don't usually connect. So for instance, movement or resonance, a sound and energy body, or it could be an idea, as you say, a concept. A concept functions again as, we could say, a spark into the soul or a seed in the soul. So that again, when there's soul making, when there's imaginal perception, when there's sensing with soul, all this is going on. Body is involved. There's a felt sense of the energy body that is different or expanded than our, not just spatially, but in terms of dimensionality and richness, than our usual way in our culture people tend to feel their bodies. There's concept involved. There's some sense of poetics involved, poetry. All this comes together. So it's a bit like we're open, receptive, sensitive, and sparks are given to us from teachers, from language, from reading, from listening, from poetry, from music, from life, from all of it. And the whole thing just gathers more, I don't want to push the image too much, but readiness to ignite. So that means that you can then take something into practice. So a line of poetry, a word, a connection between two dimensions of being, like sound and energy, for instance, and just take that as a seed, and you drop that seed into the soul. You cast that spark into the soul. Does that make sense? So you can be. There's always a range with all practice. When we talk about emptiness practice or samadhi, there's always a range between active and playful and deliberate and receptive. And for me, that whole range should be available. Whatever practice I'm doing, metta, emptiness, samadhi, jhana, blah, 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 there's always this range. And I would like everyone to feel really comfortable with that whole range. I'm not just stuck, just always just waiting and hoping, or just whatever happens is fine. But that's a really good mode, that extreme, with the sensitivity. But also with I can play, and I can kind of, I was talking with someone this morning, it's like I can engage in the art, and I know things to try, and I can respond to what's going on. So like an artist, you talk to someone who's really into their art, there's that range. So where did this come from, that music? Where did that come from, that poetry? So I don't know. It was a gift. There's a receptivity. But there's also this working of the elements. And does this make sense?
Yeah, I think I was thinking of just categorizing and realizing that's not the case. So just putting someone in a category of kinesthetic, and this person's in the category of and what sparks work for some people that work for others, but I guess it doesn't.
Well, I think it might be that people are more kinesthetic or more whatever it is. But again, I would say if we're talking about soul making, what happens as the thing gets going is that it starts to reach out and involve every aspect of our being, and actually even create and discover more aspects. So someone who, for instance, hasn't been very kinesthetic or kind of feeling that the way soul can move in the body, or after a while of soul making, they don't need to force that. It might be that they go in via the concept, but they're working with the energy body. At some point, these sparks will connect. This spreading of the, it's a good image, the tentacles of soul making, to start involving all these different dimensions and aspects of the being, so that they start to come alive, even when they haven't been alive. But we don't need to force that. We can just go if you go where there's soul making, you just invite it into this feels soul making, and you just are there in the ways that we're talking about and work with it, it will spread. It will spread into other perceptions will open, other aspects and dimensions of sensitivity of the being will just go. And you'll still have people who are more like this or more like that, and that's fine, but there's this kind of multi-dimensional, multi-aspected sort of reaching out and evolving and growing. Does that? Yeah? Great. Hannah, yes. Hi, Hannah.
Kind of links a little bit with this question. It's particularly about twoness.
Yeah.
The way that I find into images
Mm-hmm.
for myself is very kinesthetic generally, and I find it easier to do so when moving.
Mm.
And because of that, it feels like I kind of embody the image.
Yeah.
And it feels soulful, but there's not so much the twoness, you know? And I wonder about that.
Yeah, very good question. So, Hannah's saying, if I correct if I'm wrong, so a lot of the time the way that images come alive or kind of entering, engaging with the images is through the kinesthetic sense, through the body, and sometimes through movement, and the image becomes soulful, but you feel like you're embodying the image, you're becoming that image in a sense, perhaps, or yeah. And so then the question is, where's the twoness there? Yeah, it's a really good question. And one thing I could say is, if you just let that happen, let that embodiment happen, let yourself become that, and just feel that out more and more. And one possibility is what happens is that you then, others or the rest of the world becomes attuned with that image. In other words, let's say I become a dancing deity, and I'm some kind of dancing deity, and I'm really embodying that, and I'm in that. And then the world around me, in what we're calling cosmopoesis, becomes an other to that deity in some other way, or other beings. And I'm in that deity as I am, is in relationship with other. Yeah. So, but that might emerge in time as you just let yourself embody the image more. So that's one possibility. Another possibility might be, it's strange. If you think about, or if you consider the ways we're aware of body, it's like, so this relates to all the aggregates, body, aspects of mind, feelings and vague known perception. I can feel like they're me, or I'm looking at my hand, and there's a kind of twoness now between my sense of me and my hand. But at other times, there's a sense of I am my hand. Yeah. So, even when you're embodying something like that, it can move between a sort of a vantage point of being inside and being identified with, and a vantage point of kind of some objectivity or twoness. And that's just normal to perception, even in terms of our own bodies and minds. You say, strange thought I had. It's like it's something else, other. From another perspective, it's not other at all. It's me. Who else am I apart from all this stuff, And I feel that I'm that. So what happens is, this basic sort of way identification works, is it moves between twoness and identification. So if you just kind of don't kind of you're not doing anything wrong, but if you hang out more in the experience, there'll probably be a couple of ways that you'll start to notice twoness, different ways. Does that?
I wonder if it's important to emphasize the twoness at all, try and encourage it.
Yeah. So with all is it important to emphasize the twoness? Hannah's asking. So I'm just repeating so that people can hear. Yeah. So when twoness is one of the nodes, one of the elements that we're going to go through, and what I would say more than that is, or rather slightly differently, is these nodes are things we can notice. Okay, so I would put it there. It's less pushy at first. As I said, if you just, the more you hang out in these experiences as they open up, with all your sensitivity and all your enjoyment and all your curiosity, it's almost like you start to it's like your eyes get used to the dark and you start to notice, oh, there is twoness here. I hadn't noticed that. And that noticing ignites it. So I don't need to do anything so much as just notice when it comes. Sometimes it might be quite subtle. So, twoness can be really extreme. We're really alienated from something, or it's a lot more subtle, the sense of twoness. But the noticing it brings that sense of twoness alive, and that helps the whole thing become, as I explained last night, more fully imaginal, if you like. Yeah. What we might say is, I would make a distinction between experiences of oneness, like melting into kind of union with something, which is really important as a kind of mystical direction or spiritual direction. It's important in the whole soul-making business. But when we talk about imaginal perception, sensing the soul, there's more this twoness. So oneness is great, but if you find yourself kind of, after all these years of practice, and this may not be the case with you, after all these years of practice, I just have a tendency to kind of melt and find, or melt into different kinds of oneness, a kind of oneness of light, or a oneness of love, or a oneness of awareness, or whatever it is, a oneness of materiality, or it can be lots of things. Then it would be more, let's find the twoness. Let's kind of retain the twoness. Yeah. I could stop there, but when there's eros in relation, when there's in this case your embodiment, that movement, and if it is like a deity moving through, or a goddess, or whatever it is, and then the body can become your beloved other. So then there's an erotic relationship. This body, as it's felt right now in whatever is happening, becomes the erotic imaginal other, becomes the beloved other. And eros retains a sense of twoness, even when it knows oneness. I know this is one. I know we are one. Some part of my mind knows that, but in the it preserves the erotic tension of twoness, and actually creates even more kind of bifurcations and things. But I'll just throw that out as a seed. How does all this sound? Yeah. So I was thinking today just about something else entirely, about emptiness. There's a phrase, I don't know who said it originally in the Dzogchen tradition. Trust your experience, but keep refining your view. And to me, there's just so much wisdom in that. It's like, look, when we talk about, okay, what is imaginal, what's not, is this right, is there enough of this or that, or, in these nodes that we're elaborating, it's to say things can unfold more, richer, more soul-making, etc. But we have to kind of trust our experience and go with that. So in terms of what's unfolding, you can really just, if it feels soul-making, you're on the right track, and things will start to get a little more apparent in that field. Yeah? So just translate that Dzogchen phrase, trust your experience, keep refining your view. Yeah? And that's obviously to everyone. Yeah. Please. Are you Tanya, is it? Yes. Yeah.
I'll just see if I can get this question out. So after years of practice, of Buddhist practice, I end up in the imaginal. And I've been trying to, so this is about conceptual framework, I've been trying to understand how it fits. And I think what you were touching on today, and I had a bit of a train of thought around it yesterday, I was just thinking, well, there's form is emptiness, and there's emptiness is form. And I just was thinking, so is this all the imaginal stuff in a way? Is it playing with that whole area of the way emptiness manifests as form? So you have to have that sense of emptiness, but it seems to me that a lot of Buddhist practice is very much about the dissolving things into emptiness. And I just thought, oh, so maybe what I'm doing is that other side. And, why have I not, it doesn't feel like I'm aware of a huge range of practices that explore this area. There's sort of Indo-Tibetan sadhanas which play around with it to some extent, but that's a sort of given imagery that you have to sort of slot into to some extent. So I suppose my question is, is that how you see this area? I just feels like maybe this is sort of some sort of way of the Western psyche unpacking that whole area. But I don't know if there's other ways of doing it in Buddhist tradition.
Other ways of what?
Sort of exploring this in the Buddhist tradition that have worked out.
I'll try and get. So, sorry, because I'm tired. So, not your fault. So, partly the question is, what exactly is where does this all sit with Buddha Dharma and the Buddhist traditions, plural, really, and particularly with the notion of emptiness, and the common tendency of Buddhist traditions, but also non-Buddhist traditions, of kind of dissolving. And where else might we find stuff like this within Buddhist traditions? Is that what's that? Is that okay? Okay, so I don't know where else. I'm not aware of anyone of other traditions exploring. Certainly not in the way that we're talking about. There's, of course, as you say, Indo-Tibetan sadhanas and vajrayana that employ the imagination with the concept of emptiness and all that. There's overlaps there, for sure, but I would say it's a little bit different. But there's definitely overlaps. The curious thing here, so this might frustrate or confuse some people, or others might find it liberating, is that if I just answer personally, I feel like I can conceive of it in different ways. Conceive of what we're doing and kind of map it in different ways and map its relationship to different Buddhist traditions. And for me, that flexibility of conception is also part of the soul-making process. It's like it arises out of soul-making, and actually it's also part of emptiness, in some ways construed. It's like things are not emptiness. One of the things it's saying is things are not tightly definable. They're not findable. They're not rigid like that. Our concepts don't reflect some kind of truth, you know. So when we say emptiness is form, form is emptiness, I mostly in my teaching I tend to avoid the Heart Sutra because I think it can be interpreted so many different ways, which is great, you know. So if I turn and ask you a question, what do you feel you need right now with this? Because different people will need different kind of working answers or working hypotheses about this relationship between Buddha Dharma and soul-making at different points and dependent on their personality and history. So if I give it back to you for a second, what would you say you need right now?
I think for me the question's arising in terms of how I maybe explain to myself and others whether I've gone completely off piece or whether there's something I can say that other people understand.
Sure. If I, at the risk of being irritating, if I push the question one stage further and say, why? What's going on, and what's going on for you, perhaps emotionally, with that, you know? So, and it's not. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just actually what goes on for me in my relationships to the concept of, or the concepts that we're unfolding and exploring, actually creating and discovering, and the whole meaning set of concepts, but also, affect and love and reliance and community of Buddha, so I think that's a big question, but maybe you have an answer right now. So there's heart and soul and idea, and there's quite a lot involved. And do you see what I'm getting at?
I started thinking, but then you just went on, and I lost it.
Sorry. Okay. The short answer. The short question was why. Yeah, okay, so your turn.
I think because, gosh, I don't know whether I've got a decent answer, it might just peter out completely, but so one is I find it very uncomfortable sitting with having not a clue. So quite a strong sense of not knowing, which I'm kind of recognising more and thinking, okay, well actually that's fine. I can come into a sort of familiar relationship with that not knowing, and that's okay. But I think in terms of communicating to other people, there's this funny tension of some people need clarity and need to know that there's a way to go or something to do, and other people are easy, are sort of maybe happy with the uncertainty. And I think am I struggling? Sometimes I just think I sound incredibly waffly and sort of vague, and in relation to people who like clarity.
But are you in a teaching role, or okay, got it. Yeah, and you're trying to teach about soulmaking, and
so around that area, and it sounds. Well, I think it's easy for people to get lost.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there's no single answer. It can just go any which way.
Yeah.
It's so vast.
Yeah.
Yes, I think maybe that's sort of.
And so you gave two parts of an answer, and the first one was saying about being comfortable with not knowing. Not knowing what?
I think not having the comfort of, this is definitely the right way to go.
For yourself.
Yeah. Or sort of, it is around clarity actually. I think the question is just around clarity, around how difficult it is to have clarity in this area for myself or for other people.
Yeah.
And whether, what the consequence of that is. Yeah,
okay, very good. Should we just take a couple... I feel this is really important, so should we take a couple of minutes? Yeah, thank you. So let's start with that, what you said last, the business about clarity. For yourself, I would say something brought you here. Something brought you, as you said, after years of Buddha Dharma, end up in the imaginal. Why? How? You don't need to answer that now, but okay. If I might offer an answer, the soul loves soulmaking. Soul loves soulmaking. Actually, you could say that's a core concept, and everything follows from that. Soul loves soulmaking. All the blah 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 will come out. All the conceptual frame will come out of that. Soul loves soulmaking. You have a compass for soul making. Okay, all of us do. We can feel when something is. So you're going on and on. What the hell are you talking about? I'm not quite clear. Don't worry so much about the clarity just yet. Or rather, I would say trust. You can trust navigation even when things are a little bit foggy. The compass says go that way. I can't see more than 10 yards ahead, but the compass is saying go that way. So that's the inner sense of soul making, yeah. And you feel it in the energy body, you feel it in the heart, you feel it in ways that you couldn't even actually describe. And that's where we're going into all these aspects. So I would say soul of soul making. You have a instinctual, visceral, mental, emotional, soulful sense of what soul making feels like, and you can trust that as a barometer. I do think clarity is important, but it will come. So the other thing I want to say about all this, it's complex. We're building or discovering or uncovering or whatever you want to say, a kind of complex structure of subtle and sophisticated ideas that all kind of support it. So it's, that journey to clarity and precision and understanding how it all works together, it will be gradual for everyone. I mean, everyone, okay? Even the brightest person who, it's going to be, so that's okay, I think to me, the conception is part of soul making. The soul loves concept as well, and concepts that feed soul, and that it likes the intellect. It wants to include that in terms of aspects of being that haven't ignited. So that's important too. But let it feed it and let it come gradually and ask questions. And, there's, at this point, there's actually loads of listening, and there's another 40 hours or something about to come out, just warning you. It goes. It's a lot. It's sophisticated. But you have a compass anyway. Yeah. So the other thing about clarity, I want to say, and this will come in our aspects, is that there's something, as I said, kind of contradictory about the whole thing. In other words, precision is beautiful and it's fertile. It's like, I understand the concepts, it's clear. And yet the very concepts that we're using are also kind of, they have this kind of shady boundaries of unclarity to them. Why? Because that's part of their fertility. Without that, they won't be soul making. So I start putting something in this rigid, tight box. I feel, phew, I understand it. Boof goes the soul making after a little while. So there's this kind of strange tension between clarity and precision, and kind of open-ended, sort of fuzzy-edged, elastic. I'll talk about this again. So that's one thing. Later on in this retreat, we may just bring up this, because several people said, I want to teach this stuff, and so we may just discuss that amongst ourselves, and where are we all at with that, and what feels right or ready, and what's a good idea, and what's maybe, hey, let's just wait a little bit. I'm not sure how else to answer this question about speaking to others and teaching, because if it's not clear for you, it may just confuse other people. Or you might find that you can just make little poetic suggestions which open things up for people without kind of explaining a whole structure. Does that make sense? You can actually introduce there's all kinds of possibilities. You're just again throwing out poetic sparks and like that until you're ready to sort of. And now I'm clear how it all fits together. How does that sound? Yeah? Okay. But they're actually big and important. I think, again, multi-aspected questions, and it involves the whole being, all this. So, yeah. Is that okay for now? Yeah? Okay. Let's have a minute of silence together.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and Dharma Seed, please visit dharmaseed.org/donate.